I'm a freshman in university, and I dropped my first course and enrolled into a new one. This new subject is the type of class that is full of people that are considered rejects or losers. Anyhow, on my first day, it was apparent that these guys were definitely socially inept. There's only about 4 girls in the class. I take my seat and listen to my long lecture. I noticed that the guy in front of me has the habit of turning around and looking at the girls, trying to be inconspicuous, but failing. I'm sitting next to my friend Katie, and the guy keeps looking at her, seemingly working up the courage to talk to her. He eventually does, and has a high-pitched voice, which is really creepy because he has a manly face and really long beard. This man didn't belong here. Most of the kids here were 17. He looks 30. During the 10-minute break in the lecture, the guy gets up and walks about as if searching for something or someone. He walks up to a girl and tried to talk to her. I don't know how to describe it, but you know those guys that are considered special and have the knack to talk to girls, and the girls just have to be kind despite the awkwardness and don't really want to talk back? Well, this guy was doing that, and the girl was obviously uncomfortable. She was trying to look at her phone while trying to be kind. This happens for the next few months, just being creepy. Katie said there's something just probably wrong with him. And everyone seemed to treat him the same way. Now this is when it all changed, and he was revealed for what he was. I was on the train on the way home, and Evan, the creeper dude, was on the train as well. He was a few rows in front of me. The only other person on our section of the train was a girl. Evan began doing his obvious head turn and kept looking at her. Evan switched seats and went and sat behind her, about a row or two behind her and 2 rows behind me. At this point, I was just pleading he wasn't going to be creepy, but he was. He seemingly sniffed her hair when he passed by, and when he sat, he tapped his long fingernails on the seat. Evan stopped to get off was coming up. When it arrived, he didn't get off. All of my nope radars were going off in my head. He kind of hovered from his seat, and then reconsidered and sat down. My stop came up, and I stayed on. I needed to ensure this girl wasn't going to get attacked or anything. Her stop came up, and it was the rich district. She stood up. He stood up too. He obviously didn't belong there. When she walked by me, I stood behind her and blocked the way to the exit. Evan tried to ignore me. He was too focused on the girl, and he just kept trying to push by. I wasn't letting him by. He finally said, "Excuse me," in his high voice. I didn't budge and slowly panned my head up to meet his eyes, and he recognized me and began getting impatient and tried to barge past me. "You aren't getting off this train, Evan," I told him. "This isn't your stop, and you aren't going to follow that girl," I continued. At this point, Evan lost it. He began screaming and scratching me and flailing his legs and arms at me. He began hitting me with something sharp on my shoulder. I shoved him into the wall and began smashing his head into the wall of the train. I punched him in the face, and he fell unconscious. His phone fell from his pocket, and an attachment to a camera fell out. I called the police, and they came quickly. They arrested him and informed me I had a flip knife dislodged in my lower shoulder. The motherfucker stabbed me. They took me to the hospital, and I filed out a police report. They ended up finding photos of girls from my classes on his phone, and child pornography on his PC. He ended up going to a loony bin. So weird stalker dude with the high-pitched voice, let's not meet again. I am Mormon. As many know, we have missionaries, men and women, that go door to door in pairs, sharing a message. They are sent all over the world. The missionaries assigned to my city are girls. The 2 in the story are both very pretty, young, 19 to 20 years old, and pretty innocent. Often when they went to teach someone, they would ask my brother or myself to accompany them, just in case. They would usually invite us when they felt uneasy about a person, or if it was a single man, as a safety measure. This day was no different than the others. They asked me and my brother if we would go with them to visit a man named Chuck. They said they had met him at a local park, and that he seemed very nice, but just a little off. We of course obliged. They gave us the time and address and asked if we would meet them there. When we got to the address, the girls were waiting outside for us. We walked up the steep driveway to the house. As we approached the door, written in permanent marker on the door itself, was a message. It said something to the effect of, "This is Chuck's house. Please knock. If I don't answer, call this number." We all laughed. Who the hell does that? We knocked and he opened the door. He seemed very out of breath and was breathing heavily. He very enthusiastically invited the girls in. We were about 4 feet behind them. Then he noticed us. His countenance changed immediately. He said, "I thought you two would be coming alone." They answered with a typical, "They come with us from time to time, they're our friends," type of answer. He gave us an up-down look and said, "Come on in." It was weird. The minute we walked into this dude's house, I felt really weird. This guy's house was immaculate, but the strange thing was there was no furniture at all. Totally empty. He had 2 bar stools set aside, and that was it. And on every wall in the house was shelving with plants on them, all types of plants, and literally hundreds. Lettuce, spinach, herbs, and such. They were all labeled on the wall in permanent marker. The guy wrote on his walls in marker too. Weird. The girls sat on the bar stools, and he sat on the floor. My brother and I stood, and they began their message. About 5 minutes in, he interrupted them. "Oh, I forgot, I made you girls some drinks. Are you thirsty?" They kindly said no, but he insisted. He went in the fridge and got 2 already prepared drinks out. They had this dirty brown-colored liquid in them. It looked like muddy water. He said that he had made them for them earlier in the day. He didn't have one for him, or for us, just the 2 girls. He handed them the glasses, and then just stood there and stared, waiting for them to drink. I immediately felt like this was a bad idea, and I could see that my brother and the girls were equally uncomfortable. They made an awkward conversation, and I signaled to them that we should go. They cut themselves short, and we left. He was visibly upset and kept telling us to come back whenever we wanted. When we got to the driveway, we got in our cars, and I told the girls to come over to my house. At my house, I told them that they probably shouldn't go back, and they agreed. I knew Chuck's last name. It was on his freaking door in a Sharpie, for heaven's sake. And I did some quick Googling. This guy was released from a police department in California for general reasoning and admitted to a psych ward for over a year. They didn't say why, but there was a whole newspaper write-up on it. I don't know what his intentions were, but they were for way too many weird pieces for me to want to see him again. So, creepy, drink-making, Sharpie-writing Chuck, let's not meet again. This story happened to my dad well back in the 70s. He lived in a farming area, and each house was a few miles apart from each other. When my dad was about 14 years old, he was invited to sleep over at his uncle's house. My dad had liked this uncle, so he went over for the night. His uncle had a wife and 3 kids. Ages were 3, 4, and a baby that was like 6 months old. They had a great time eating, chatting, playing with the kids, and then it was bedtime. My dad goes to sleep and wakes up to this huge noise. When he hears screaming and something that sounded like a gunshot, he runs to his uncle's room to see his uncle shooting the wife and kids. My dad freaks out and runs away. He runs across the house and tries to go through one door, but he can't open it because it was jammed for some reason. So his only option was to run back to the other side and use the other door, which would mean he would need to cross his uncle's room again. He had no choice, and slowly walks back and couldn't help but peek in the room. He sees his uncle standing there with a gun, and as my dad is staring at him, his uncle turns around and looks at him and says, "You're lucky I let you live," and puts the gun to his head. As my dad freaks out and starts running, he hears one more gunshot. My dad runs out of the house and keeps running down the dirt road all the way back to his own house. Luckily, his dad was still up with some friends drinking and playing cards. My dad basically collapses as he makes it to his front porch and tells everyone what happened. They call the police, and the police go investigate and find everyone dead. A little while later, my dad finds out that his uncle had quite a few mental issues and was supposed to be taking medication for it, which he wasn't. That is the reason he went crazy that night. As you can imagine, my dad was pretty traumatized for a long time after, and had nightmares for a very long time. When I was younger, 13 or so, I had a couple of close friends who I used to hang out with all the time. We would go to the local park, accompanied by our parents, and play there till sundown. Most of the time it was tag, or hide and seek, or a game of Raid Their Kingdom. Basically, capture the flag, but we used Nerf guns, and had to shoot the opponent's leader in the heart. It was a 3 versus 3, one attacker, one defender, and the leader. It was the perfect place to play this game, since it was a park surrounded by trees, so camouflage and sneaking up on the opposition were easy. This one time, on a Sunday, our parents didn't have anything to do at home, and wanted to talk to each other some more, so we took advantage of that and played till well past sundown. Our logic, night made it more real, was probably not solid, but we'd been playing this game for 2 months now, and our parents were distracted. We roamed deeper into the trees, shouting and laughing all the while, which undoubtedly attracted someone to our location. A few minutes passed, and we hit the wall which connected the park to the neighborhood, and we were about to turn back until we saw a figure lying in the ground. Full of adrenaline, we shouted out "Honey," one of our friends' names, until we realized she was lying behind us, in a place we had to pass in order to get here. Since the dirt pathway we created for ourselves over the ditch was barely 6 inches wide, there was no way we could have missed her. The color drained out of our faces as we realized she was following us. Shining our weak Nerf gun lights on her, we slowly moved closer, wanting to go back. It was an older woman, barely in her 30s, a normal-looking person except the fact that she was lying crouched up on the ground. We were about to shoot her to get her to go away from us, looking distraught and emitting a heavy breathing sound and low grunts, at which point our undeveloped minds decided it was dangerous, and we walked around her, carefully not to make any sounds, as we made our way back in the direction we came from, until she stood up. We shone our weak lights onto her, and saw her pupils were dilated to the point where they were nearly invisible. A low grunt, and she charged at us. We ran, just ran, thinking about nothing other than outrunning that crazed woman, even forgetting about Honey, focused solely on surviving. A few seconds of sprinting like there's no tomorrow later, we turned behind us and saw nothing, running up to where our parents were sitting, chatting away like nothing happened. Honey was there with them, not wanting to venture deeper into the forest, but completely forgetting about telling them that we were going deeper. As our parents saw us panting and sweating, they laughed and said we took our games way too seriously, until we told them what had happened, at which point, as far as I can remember, their faces went pale, as one of our moms pulled out a cell phone to call the police, as the others guided us back to our car. Fast forward to the next day. After getting scolded by my parents, My mom's friend called and told her the police had found the woman, perfectly matching the description. At this point, we switched parks. It wasn't until 3 years later that I casually brought up that day at dinner, and my mom told me what really happened. Apparently, the woman had been high off the charts, and the grunting sounds were her snorting cocaine. When they caught her near morning, she was half dead and had snorted 11 grams of cocaine, which the police had shared with my mom's friend after much angry persuasion, and they probably felt obliged to tell us anyway. Back to the topic, the lethal dose is 12 grams, and she nearly went off over that limit. Thank God cocaine makes your stamina deteriorate way faster, otherwise she probably would have taken a bite out of us or something. It was roughly 5 p.m. I was in the passenger seat of my car. My girlfriend was driving. She was learning to drive, and as I was 21 at the time, I was allowed to be her sit-in experienced driver. She was 19 at the time, and fairly inexperienced on the roads. On this day, she was driving around a roundabout that is notorious in the area for being difficult for anyone that doesn't know the road very well. She had to exit where 2 lanes join into one. As she's going around, a black Corsa is in the right lane that soon joins into the left, the one we're in. He indicates that he's coming over, and I tell my girlfriend to slow down and let him in front of us. She proceeds to slow down, but the car doesn't move from the lane. She then must have gotten impatient and bolted past him, something she admittedly shouldn't have really done. In the rearview mirror, I saw the driver's middle finger fly at us, and I tell my girlfriend that although he should have gone in front of us, she was also in the wrong. She apologized and said she wouldn't do it again. We carried on driving until we were at our house. She pulled up into the driveway, and we both got out of the car. All of a sudden, the black Corsa pulls up on the curb to our house. The driver gets out and starts walking over to us. He was an odd-looking man, roughly 35 years old, 5 feet and 8 inches tall, with dirty blonde hair, and was wearing a casual business suit with blue jeans. He stormed over to us and started yelling at my girlfriend about how she could have killed him and that he would like to see their roles reversed. I see my girlfriend is almost crying at this point, and I ask the man to calm down. He tells me to get fucked and goes to push me out of the way. I push him back harder and tell him to get off our property. He then leaps at my girlfriend, arms outstretched. I grab him by the waist with both arms and slam him to the ground. With this, the man runs to his car and drives away. After a rather quiet dinner, we played on the Xbox for a couple of hours and then went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to my girlfriend frantically shaking me to wake me up. I smiled until I saw the sheer panic on her face. It was as if she had seen a ghost. She dragged me to the window, and who was outside, looking me directly in the eyes? The man in the black Corsa. I thought about calling the police and suggested it to my girlfriend, but we never did. We kept all the curtains closed as we got dressed and ate our breakfast, both of us wondering what he was doing back. My girlfriend had to work, but I had the day off, so I insisted I drive her instead of her taking the bus with the current situation that we were in. We opened the door slowly, and the man was now on the other side of the street, but still looking directly at us. We kept eye contact with him all the way up the driveway until we got to the car. As we were getting in, we heard a noise. The man was walking toward us with a crowbar in his hands. At this moment, we jumped in the car and sped off fast. After dropping my girlfriend off at work, I went to the car park to drive back home when I saw the same black Corsa parked a few spaces away from me, but with no sign of the man. I quickly ran inside my girlfriend's workplace to find him sitting in the waiting room. When I entered, he glared at me with what looked like an animalistic state of mind. I walked over to him, furious. "What the fuck is your problem?" I asked quietly, but with serious force behind me. He didn't answer. He just continued to glare at me until I saw something in his coat pocket. It was a knife. I backed away and left the building and called my girlfriend on her office phone. I told her that the black Corsa man was in the building and with a knife. I told her to stay in her office, and then I called the police. After explaining everything over the phone, they arrived in roughly 7 to 9 minutes. Fortunately, the man was still inside the building. 2 police officers then entered the building. Around 5 minutes later, they returned with the man in handcuffs and the knife in a clear evidence bag. My girlfriend's boss let her go home early, and we drove home. We never found out who the man was or never saw or heard from him again, but we both still think to this day, what if I hadn't driven her to work that day? What if I hadn't seen the knife just poking out of his coat? So many what-ifs. It's now 2 years later, and we still think about the man from time to time.